Hello and welcome back to my channel and to my Pier Paolo Pasolini retrospective. And today we've reached film number 6, Oedipus Rex. And this is cause to celebrate, my friends, because this is when Pasolini launches into colour. And what colour? What a lick-the-screen, gorgeous film this is. Together with his cinematographer Giuseppe Rossellini, Pasolini creates a phantasmagoria of colour. Now, just as we saw with Gospel according to St. Matthew, where he takes the Christian story, but he uses the paraphernalia from all sorts of different cultures and mythologies to bring it to life. Here, he takes the play by Sophocles, the classical Greek play, and he just throws everything into the mix to create this kind of fantasy world of his own imagination. So he shot it not in Europe, but he shot it in Morocco, among those beautiful ancient mud cities out in the desert. This is a film of vast plains, and lakes in the middle of nowhere, and cities where there's no one around, there's just these ancient stone walls, beautiful brown colours in the setting sun. And then there's the costumes. You'll spend a lot of your time in watching this movie just revelling in the costumes, which are bonkers. They're by Danilo Donati, and they're kind of combination of like catwalk mayhem and sort of mythical ideas of costumes that are in our mind but never really existed. And they're extraordinary, and they really add to this kind of crazy, lurid world of Pasolini's imagination. So it's a gorgeous textural film. But there's something else that Pasolini is launching into here, arguably for the first time. And that is a wholly personal syntax, a wholly personal way of looking at the world. I remember the film critic Gilbert Adair once talked about there being movies that take you into the soul of a filmmaker, so that there's nothing else in the movie but just the way that that filmmaker sees things. So something like Terence Davies' The Long Day Closes, The Testament of Orpheus by Cocteau, Mirror by Tarkovsky. It's just, there's no sort of realism that we all share. We go into this space where we're inside this person's soul. In a way, I kind of feel that that's what this movie is. This is Pasolini. He's gone through his first stage, which has links to neorealism, right, and mythical ideas, and now he's going to a much more personal space. At the start of the film, and I love the prologue of this film. It's about 10 minutes long, and it's one of the most beautiful things Pasolini ever did, and he himself actually said it's one of the best pieces of filmmaking he ever did. What he does is he starts the Oedipus Rex story where he is Oedipus. And he starts us in sort of 1920s, 1930s, Italy. It seems to be a country town, although actually Pasolini was born in Bologna and raised in Bologna. But it's got this wonderful evocation of that period in Italian history. He's a little child, his mother playing with other women out in the fields, her suckling him in a meadow under these trees. It's a beautiful evocation of that early part of our childhood. Those sort of fragmented memories we have and impressions we have. It's a sort of an impressionistic collage of our relationship with our mother and then an antagonism with our father. And in it, Pasolini starts to introduce innovations, like some of the spoken dialogue in the film is written on screen as a subtitle, and we only see the interaction between people in their expression on their faces. He also uses Mozart's Dissonance Quartet quite beautifully throughout the film, but particularly in an opening close-up on Silvano Mangana, who plays his mother, and who will play the mother in the actual story of Oedipus Rex. What an incredible face she has, almost like a mask, like a sort of, Renaissance mask. That lead-up is absolutely extraordinary. And then what happens is, as the conflict between the husband and the boy metaphorically is brought to a head, then we go into this complete netherworld, this kind of fantasy zone of Pasolini's imagination. We go to the deserts of Morocco, and we go into the story of Oedipus Rex. So what that means is that the whole story that we're going to see is in some ways autobiographical. right? It reminds me a lot of Christopher Priest's novel, The Affirmation, which I've talked about on this channel before. Christopher Priest's novel, which he wrote in about 1980, this guy is a young man, right, and he's hit hard times. He's fallen out with his girlfriend, he's lost his job, he's losing his flat in London. And a friend of the family gives him a chance to go and do up their house in the country. And while he's there, he decides to write his autobiography, right? So he lists all the things that have happened to him, lists facts, and it doesn't really work. It doesn't properly sum him up. So what he decides to do instead is to invent a total fantastic story where the main character represents him more accurately. That from this fantasy, you get a greater impression of his thoughts and feelings and his personality than if you just wrote a dry autobiography. And in a sense, I think that that's what Pasolini is doing in this film. This film is not an adaptation of a classic text, as much as a very personal film, taking us into, Pasolini's own psychogeography. I mean, when you think about it, Oedipus Rex is about a man who he commits evil. He kills his own father, he marries his own mother, but he's totally unaware. He's guiltless, yet everything, the whole universe conspires against him. And you can see how Pasolini might, align himself with that story. After all, he had a terrible time with his father, who was a soldier. And they didn't agree at all, and they fought badly. And then, Pasolini was gay in a world which didn't recognize that, didn't want it, and, persecuted it. So this idea, when, Oedipus says to himself, look, I'm evil, everyone's, I'm evil, but I haven't done this, I didn't do anything wrong. You can see how the psychogeography of Oedipus and the psychogeography of Pasolini start to align in interesting ways. So all the way through the film, you're watching this kind of classical piece, but Pasolini has made you think about looking at it in two planes of existence. So we start and end with him in Bologna. And then the middle piece is completely fictitious, but then they sort of correspond, they're going together at the same time. And then later on, he goes to the Apollo, the oracle, the Delphic oracle, to get a prophecy about his life. And they tell him, you're going to kill your father and you're going to sleep with your mother, and they laugh at him. And Pasolini represents this. He walks away, and he's walking away in a desert, completely alone, shattered. But then he keeps cutting back to all these people waiting to see the oracle, all this market and these traders and the people in the line. And he keeps cutting between these two. We're in two planes of understanding, two planes that run concurrent. So just as Pasolini's story is running concurrent with that of Oedipus Rex, so Oedipus's mind is running concurrent. He's walking through a field of people, but he's completely alone. And the whole movie is working in that register. This movie is a lot more mixed up. It's a lot less classical, in a way, than his previous films. We see this from the very first moments. I'm always going on about the title credit sequence in Pasolini, aren't I? But they start not with classical music. They start with crickets, sound of I always get crickets and cicadas mixed up, but there's just the sound of them at night in the fields around this town where he's growing up, and then a little brass band in the distance. That's the opening credits. And what we'll see is that Pasolini starts changing things up here. There's a lot of almost like Steadicam shots. Steadicam hadn't been invented by that point, but, people walking with the camera, that kind of documentary style filming, as opposed to that beautiful, clean, open filming that Pasolini was known for up until this point. He also uses wide lenses towards the end. So he's kind of changing it up and he's messing it around. He's got all these crazy costumes that clash in terms of period and iconography. He uses Japanese music at key moments during the thing. He's just going freestyle now. Another thing that Pasolini mixes up is the casting. We're moving away from that near-realist thing of taking people off the street. They appear in this film, but they also appear alongside well-known actors like Elida Valli, who will play Oedipus Rex's adoptive mother. I'm not quite sure about that piece of casting. I'm also not sure about the piece of casting of Carmelo Bene, who himself was an Italian film director, cult director at the time, playing Crayon, rather odd presence in the film. But it just shows that, there's a more freewheeling Pasolini here. Also, this kind of lurid phantasmagoric world and this mix of colour and costume and music reminded me a lot of Michael Powell, actually, and the kind of lurid worlds that he finds, for example, in Tales of Hoffmann or his adaptation of Bluebeard's Castle, that kind of complete film that Michael Powell was going for. I think there's very much a feel of that in Oedipus Rex. I was reading a write-up by James Quant, actually, in this Pasolini box set. And Quant says that this is Pasolini more and more rejecting the industrialised, capitalist, commercialised modern world of Italy, that he's kind of going out and inventing his own world, which picks up on the ancient, and the eternal. But he's also in some ways making it up, He's having fun with it. There's an extraordinary extra on this box set that goes with this film. I think they've just put it on there arbitrarily. It's worth watching. It's called Notes on a Film on India. So what Pasolini does is he travels to India and he's got this idea for a film. But instead of making the film, what he does is he goes around India talking to people saying, what would this film be like? What kind of person would I cast? How would the story work? Is this true of contemporary India? And so what Pasolini is starting to do is he's starting to think not how to make a story, but it's also making an essay film, deconstructing that process. Is this true to life? Is this my own mythology? Is it the mythology of the people? And similarly in Oedipus Rex, it's moving all over the place. So he's very true to Sophocles' play. It's a very faithful adaptation, yet it's completely mad. The first part of it, he has his own life, and at the end, he shows Franco Citti, who plays Oedipus Rex, stumbles out onto the streets of Bologna, where Pasolini is from, blind, this kind of ignored prophet, really, this man who understands but no one listens to, and it's kind of, again, like Pasolini feels about himself, really. So it's kind of an indulgent movie, really, a bit solipsistic. It's like, just with that film with India, he's saying, I don't have to follow the rules. I'll make up my own rules and see where that takes me. And so I find this film breathtakingly irreverent and new and original and deeply personal. And I've got a whole new respect for this film all over again. It was one of the Pasolini films that I wasn't quite sure about, but watching it again this time round, I'm absolutely blown away by it. It's a masterpiece, I think, an extraordinary movie. Thanks very much.